The anime tells the story of Ishigami Senku, a prodigy with a deep interest in science. And at the beginning of the anime, he is shown experimenting in his school laboratory with his friends. But a moment later, a friend named Oki Taiju burst into the lab, saying excitedly to Senku that today he would express his feelings to the girl he likes, Ogawa Yuzoriha. Senku responds as if he has no interest in Taiju's plans. However, he later gives him a love potion that is said to increase people's courage, thereby increasing Taiju's chances of being accepted by Yuzoriha. But he refused the potion. He does not want to cheat in matters of love. So, Taiju went towards the school grounds where Yuzoriha was waiting for him. All his friends who watched from the classroom agreed that she would reject him, but not with Senku. He was sure that Yuzoriha would accept Taiju's confession, and he was even willing to bet 10,000 yen. However, just as Taiju was about to confess his feelings, a blinding green light suddenly enveloped the world, turning all humans into stone. Surprisingly, only humans and pigeons were affected by the light, while other creatures such as dogs and cats were not. And even so, that doesn't mean humans have died. Their consciousness is still active, so they are well aware of their surroundings and what is happening to them. Likewise, Taiju was determined to confess his feelings to Yuzoriha someday, whether he had to wait a year or 1,000 years. Then, about 3,700 years later, the world has now completely changed as if it was back in time immemorial when humans had not yet created civilization. And it was at this point that Senku suddenly broke free from petrification, only to find the world he knew no longer existed. Senku realized he had to do something to survive in this new world, so he decided to make sharp objects out of stone and wood. After that, he made a rope from a tree branch, which he then strung with wood. And voila, he can create fire from these objects. But all that will be in vain if Senku does not eat. So, he made a spear which he used to hunt animals. Unfortunately, his physical strength was weak, so he didn't get any results from his hunting session. Senku immediately realized his weakness, and sooner or later, he would starve to death if he continued to act like a professional hunter. So, he uses his brain. He made an animal trap with which he caught a deer. Senku has mastered making fire, creating sharp weapons, and getting food. The next step is to make shelter and clothes because he can't wear leaf panties forever after all. Long story short, Senku managed to make a simple house within a few months. He is also now wearing trendy clothes. In other words, he already has the basic needs of a human being. But Senku is still a human, and humans cannot live alone. He had proven himself that surviving alone was very difficult and exhausting. Plus, he misses interacting with other people. And so, he starts looking for his childhood friend, Taiju, who is still in a petrified state. He still can't understand how to heal people from petrification. He thought he was able to revive because of natural erosion. But why only he revived while others didn't? After some thought, he concluded that there must be an external factor. Senku remembered when he was still petrified, he was in a cave. So, he returned to the cave, where he later found drops of water from the ceiling mixed with the bat's guano, which contains a compound called nitric acid. Senku guessed that it was the nitric acid that made him free from petrification. He pulled out a few strands of his still petrified hair to prove his assumption and dripped nitric acid on them. Sure enough, the nitric acid can corrode the stones in his hair. Excited, Senku started to collect the acid in a small pot and then poured it over Taiju. But to his surprise, Taiju remained petrified. Likewise, when he tried to sprinkle it on other people who were petrified. The anomaly forced Senku to rack his brain again, trying to find things that might set him apart from other people. He finally assumed that when he was petrified, he never stopped thinking. He counts the time down to the second, letting him know how long he has been petrified. The mysterious light appeared in 2019, and Senku was revived in April 5738. So, in essence, Senku can be free from petrification thanks to nitric acid plus the energy from his brain that he always uses to think. It also explains why rock erosion starts from his head. Left with no choice, Senku carried the stone Taiju on his back to the cave, where he placed him under the drops of acid, hoping Taiju would recover with his willpower. Granted, Taiju may not be the brightest person in his class, but he has a strong will to survive, especially since he wants to meet Yuzoriha again. So not long after, he was freed from petrification. As soon as he was free, Taiju covered his crotch area with a trending outfit, leaf panties. Then he tried to find someone else, and in the process, he found a message that Senku carved on the tree. Through the message, Senku gave a clue how Taiju could find him. Sure enough, after Taiju followed the lead, he finally reunited with his best friend, and the reunion was really touching. Regardless, Taiju's presence really helped Senku. He still bears all the work that requires a brain, but when it comes to jobs that require muscle, Taiju will take over. As for their next plan, Senku wanted to find a way to free the people from petrification. The problem is that not everyone has a brain like Senku or the power like Taiju. Because of this, Senku thought of making a chemical called nitol, which could be obtained by mixing nitric acid with ethanol. Ethanol can be extracted from alcohol, which would be hard to find in this world, but Taiju has an idea of how they can make it. Incidentally, when he was looking for food, he saw a lot of wild grapes around them, and they could try to ferment the grapes into alcohol. After 3 weeks, they turned the grapes into wine and then heated them to extract the ethanol. They mixed the ethanol with the acid and then tested it on a petrified swallow. Their experiments yielded satisfactory results. The compound managed to revive the swallow instantly. Excited by the discovery, Senku and Taiju tracked down Yuzuriha, intending to free her. But just as Taiju picked up the petrified her, a herd of lions appeared and tried to attack them, forcing the two to flee while carrying her. They realized that they couldn't fight the lions, but they know who can stand against them: Shishio Tsukasa, the famous martial artist, dubbed the strongest primate on Earth. So, without wasting any more time, they ran to where Tsukasa was and freed him. The strongest primate turns out to be not just a silly nickname. He was able to beat the lions with his bare hands. Now, Senku and Taiju have a new ally in the strongest primate, who immediately returns the favor by hunting animals for them to eat. Even so, Senku feels anxious about Tsukasa because, after all, he is the strongest human being, at least right now. And if he turns into evil, they couldn't possibly stop him. Therefore, Senku secretly planned to create a weapon in anticipation of his worries turning into reality. Well, this strongest primate may look terrible to others, but Tsukasa is also a human with a past, a very dark past. He told Senku about it while they were at the beach. So, when Tsukasa was little, he once looked for shells on the beach for his sister. But when he was busy hunting, a big man suddenly came and beat him, arguing that he had stolen the shells. Although the incident sounded slightly ridiculous, it played a huge role in shaping his current personality. Tsukasa thought not everyone deserved to be freed from petrification, especially those greedy and rotten, who would most likely taint the stone world in which they live today. He was afraid that if civilization returned to normal one day, the rulers and rich people would again oppress the weak, just like in the past. And he doesn't even want modern technology to return because he thinks humans will use it to start wars and destroy the world. So instead of repeating past mistakes, Tsukasa thinks now is the right time to fix the world. To that end, he asks Senku to only resurrect his chosen ones, with whom he will establish a new world order. But Senku couldn't agree with Tsukasa's crazy idea. He wants to free everyone without exception and restore civilization, a civilization focused on science. Two people with two different goals. It certainly makes conflict inevitable. During this tense situation, Taiju arrives and accidentally reveals nitric acid, allowing Tsukasa to know the secret to revive people from petrification. And so, he went to check into the nitric acid cave while Senku and he were getting ready to escape from Tsukasa. But before that, they freed Yuzuriha first. After Yuzuriha returned to her normal state, they went to a mountain to make weapons. Their plan was to make gunpowder which they would use for firearms. No matter how strong Tsukasa is, he will still die if he receives a bullet to his head. But it seems difficult to beat Tsukasa because he is not a man who only relies on his muscles. He's also pretty smart. When he returned to Senku's base camp and found Senku and Taiju not there, he immediately suspected them. And so, following their footsteps, Tsukasa started running after them. And he didn't have to bother looking because a moment later, a loud explosion followed by smoke rose high in the distance. There were no more humans around. The smoke must be coming from Senku and the others, he thought. Tsukasa's guess was true. The smoke did come from the people he was chasing. The smoke came from the gunpowder that accidentally exploded while Senku and the others were concocting it. But a moment later, suddenly, there was an explosion from another direction as if someone wanted to give them a signal. But that also meant someone else freed from the petrification besides the four of them. But before they could think much about it, Tsukasa had arrived at their location, and to make matters worse, he held Yuzuriha hostage. He threatened Senku, asking him to give him the revival fluid formula. If he refused, Tsukasa would kill her, and it would be easy for him to do so. Having no choice, Senku was forced to tell Tsukasa the formula for revival fluid, including the function of alcohol in its compounding. But then he decides to kill Senku after getting the formula because, after all, Senku could be a threat to his new world order plans. Moreover, he saw how Senku planned to make a weapon to harm him, even though his experiment failed for some ridiculous reason. And so, with one strike, he broke Senku's neck. But luckily, Senku has Taiju. Knowing his friend was in danger, Taiju immediately detonated the remaining gunpowder and then used the smoke that enveloped the area to take Senku and Yuzuriha away. After feeling safe, he tried to give first aid to Senku, although his efforts ended in vain. But Taiju still didn't want to give up. He tried to find a way to save Senku until he finally realized that there was a small part of Senku's nape that was still petrified. Without thinking twice, he splashed revival fluid on it, making the nerves in his neck recover as the stone shattered. As a result, Senku got up and recovered healthily. Shortly after surviving his near-death experience, Senku devised a new plan to deal with Tsukasa. He asks Taiju and Yuzuriha to pretend to join Tsukasa so they can spy on him. As for Senku himself, he will look for the person who sent the smoke signal earlier. With that, they parted ways to carry out their respective missions. This also marks the beginning of Senku and Tsukasa's efforts to achieve their goals. He intends to establish a kingdom focused on science, while Tsukasa has the ambition of establishing an empire according to his ideals, which are based on strength and power. After parting ways with Taiju and Yuzuriha, Senku continued to look for the person who made the smoke sign. But in the end, Tsukasa found the person first, who turned out to be a girl named Kohaku. She saw how Tsukasa was trying to kill Senku, and, feeling that he was a dangerous man, she immediately attacked him. In his battle with Kohaku, Tsukasa tries to analyze where she might come from. Indeed, she sounds strange because she calls and views science as magic, indicating that she is a primitive person, not a modern person who has just been freed from petrification. Realizing this, Tsukasa decided not to kill her. After all, he only targets people who favor science and want to return the world to the way it was. And so, Tsukasa felled a tree to trap her, rendering her unable to move as she was crushed by the tree. Fortunately, after Tsukasa left, Senku arrived at the scene and found Kohaku. But since he couldn't move the big tree, he made a pulley to lift the tree and save her. As a thank you, Kohaku then took her to the village where she lived, whose entrance was guarded by two people, Kinro and Ginro. Just like her, those two people didn't understand science either. But to Senku's surprise, one of the villagers is interested in science. His name is Chrome. Since he was little, Chrome liked collecting different stones to experiment with. And if the experiment was successful, he proudly called it magic. Senku immediately asked to be allowed into Chrome's laboratory, where he examined various kinds of scientific materials and medicinal plants. Chrome admitted that he had collected the medicinal plants on purpose. He is trying to find a cure for Ruri, the daughter of the village chief and Kohaku's sister, who suffers from a congenital disease. Ruri had given up herself to her illness, but not Kohaku and Chrome. Senku thought that Ruri's illness might be cured with antibiotics, but making antibiotics in the Stone Age like this isn't easy, even for him. Plus, they must also make the necessary equipment to go through various complicated stages. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to make antibiotics. First of all, they had to make iron. So Senku, Kohaku, Chrome, and another villager, Suika, went to a nearby river to collect iron sand. Then, after the iron sand has accumulated enough, they have to heat it in the furnace at a temperature of 1,500 degrees. But unfortunately, just the four of them weren't enough to heat the furnace. They need help from the residents. Of course, Senku and the others couldn't just make them work for nothing. To persuade the residents, they needed a strategy, and he had a great idea. He would persuade the residents by making them modern food, something they had never tasted before. And so, Senku and the others started gathering the ingredients to make the meal. They collect asparagus fern, which they then turn into flour. After that, they mix it with eggs and then stir until it becomes a dough. The dough should be cut into thin strips before boiling in a hot pot. For the sauce, they use chicken and fish broth, and as a final touch, they add meat to it. Can you guess what they made? It's ramen, of course. Yes, it's only natural that Senku chooses to make ramen. Who would refuse ramen? Everyone loves it, including the villagers. However, just as everyone was happily sipping their ramen, a suspicious person suddenly appeared in their midst, and that person is also holding a bowl of ramen. It turns out that that person is Asagiri Gen, a modern human who was freed from petrification by Tsukasa. In his previous life, he was a magician. That's why he could suddenly appear like that and secretly take a bowl of ramen. Regardless, he came to the village to spy and confirm whether Senku was really dead. But deep down, he actually really admires Senku. Senku and the others let him stay in the village because now they had more important business to make iron. Long story short, after they succeeded in making iron, they moved on to the next stage, making electricity generators. To do so, they wrapped an iron rod with copper and brought it up high, which was hit by lightning, making it a powerful magnet. The magnets were eventually used as electricity generators. Later that night, Senku showed everyone what electricity was. He climbed onto the roof of the house and turned on the lamp with the electricity, making those who saw it amazed. But then, a surprising thing happened. While alone in the forest, Gen was attacked by one of the villagers, causing severe injuries. Senku and his friends took good care of him, and it touched his heart that he decided to defect to Senku's science kingdom. As indicated by Gen asked Senku to make him a bottle of cola. A few days later, Gen immediately returned to Tsukasa's place after the wound healed. But this time, he acts as Senku's spy alongside Taiju and Yuzuriha. Meanwhile, after investigating, Senku and the others finally find the culprit who attacked Gen. He is Magma, the strongest fighter in the village after Kohaku. Not only that, but he is also the strongest candidate to become the village head. This village has a tradition of holding a fighting tournament, in which the tournament winner has the right to become the village head and marry Ruri. In the previous tournament held last year, Magma was defeated by Kohaku. But since Kohaku is Ruri's sister, her victory is not considered. So, since the tournament had yet to produce a winner, it would be repeated this year, with Magma again being a strong candidate for the winner. But Senku and his friends don't want Magma to be the winner because if he wins the tournament and marries Ruri, it will make their plan to heal her even more difficult. It seems Magma wasn't the man who would allow others to approach his wife. Therefore, they began to divide the tasks. Kinro and Ginro will train with Kohaku, while Senku and Chrome will continue to make antibiotics. The thing that Senku needs right now is a glass case. But before they made the container, he took the time to make glasses for Suika, who was nearsighted. And to make things easier, he put the glasses on the mask that she often wore. She cried happily as she could clearly see the beauty of the scenery around her. After making glasses for Suika, Senku and Chrome resumed their work on making glass cases. But unfortunately, their work always ends very badly. At this moment, Chrome was reminded of a resident with excellent hand skills. He is Kaseki, a muscular old man who designs the village bridge and equipment. With the help of that tough geezer, Senku and Chrome finally managed to make the thing they needed. Then, the next step is to make sulfuric acid, a chemical compound that contains poison. But that's not a problem for Senku, who already knows what a mask is. Without much difficulty, they managed to get sulfuric acid from its source. And finally, Senku and Chrome need one more ingredient, sake. But they had no intention of putting it in Ruri's medicine. Senku just wanted the residents to be able to celebrate the end of the tournament with sake. The next day, a fighting tournament between village warriors was held. Senku, Chrome, Ginro, Kinro, and Kohaku participated in the tournament. But Kohaku ends up unable to participate in the tournament because Magma has already implemented his devious plan to have her disqualified. Before the tournament, he kidnaps Suika and hides her, forcing Kohaku to look for her. She was in charge of finding Suika because, after all, she was the strongest fighter the village had. And so, without waiting for Kohaku to return, the tournament began, with the first battle pitting Magma against Kinro. Kinro is actually a strong and great fighter, but he has one fatal flaw: he suffers from nearsightedness, just like Suika. Luckily, Suika came back at just the right time. Seeing Kinro fighting, she threw her mask at him so he could borrow it. Wearing the mask, Kinro could anticipate and dodge all of Magma's attacks before launching a counterattack that cornered him. As if realizing he couldn't beat his opponent, Magma protested the referee for letting Kinro wear a mask. His protest automatically made him turn his attention to the referee to see if he was allowed to wear a mask. But that was precisely what Magma had been waiting for. As soon as he was caught off guard, Magma immediately attacked him from behind. Ultimately, Magma managed to win the fight with his cunning methods. Chrome successfully defeated his opponent in the second fight. Then, in the third battle, Senku, who should have fought against Kohaku, came out victorious since she still hadn't returned to the arena. In the semifinals, Chrome must face Magma. But in truth, he was no match for the sly man. Magma's physical strength was far superior to Chrome's, making their duel look more like torture than a fair fight. However, when his body was already battered, Chrome finally found a way to defeat Magma using Suika's glasses and sunlight. He burned Magma's body, making him scream in the heat of the fire, and thus made Chrome the victor of the fight. Senku also won in the semifinals, so the final battle pitted Chrome and Senku to fight against each other. But apparently, Chrome was badly injured from his battle with Magma, leaving him with no energy to fight. And so, the winner of that tournament was Senku. With this, he was automatically appointed as village head. After the tournament, Senku immediately processed the medicine for Ruri and gave it to her as soon as the medicine was ready. He continued to give her the medicine for the next few days until she finally recovered from her illness. Senku's values and victory in the tournament made the villagers trust him even more. They all agreed to appoint him as the new village head. And as the village head, he practically has the right to know the village's history. But what he heard from Ruri about the village's history made him tremble in shock. It turns out that the village's name is Ishigami, just like his surname. So, what really happened? Why is the name of the village exactly the same as Senku? To find out, we need to go back in time to just before the petrification incident. At that time, Senku's father, Ishigami Byakuya, worked as a representative astronaut from Japan. He and 5 other people were on the International Space Station when the petrification event occurred. 5 people were Lillian Weinberg, Shamil, Daria, Yakov, and Connie. They could only watch from outer space as a mysterious green light enveloped the Earth. Worried, they then decide to return to Earth, only to find everyone else petrified. They weren't sure if other people were still alive, and they didn't know how to get people back to normal either. Therefore, they try to survive with just the 6 of them. They built a village and reproduced it until finally, the village grew into Ishigami Village with many residents. So, all the villagers that Senku now saw in front of him were descended from the 6 astronauts, including his father. In the present, all the villagers are celebrating the appointment of a new village leader. But during the celebration, Ruri takes Senku to the graves of their ancestors, where she shows him a message from Byakuya, who is sure that someday Senku will revive. Therefore, he ordered Senku to rebuild civilization to save mankind. Upon his return to the village, Senku meets with Gen, who informs him that the Tsukasa Empire has sent soldiers to take over Ishigami Village. Sure enough, a few moments later, they came to attack led by Tsukasa's right-hand man, Hyoga. Like Tsukasa, Hyoga also has great fighting abilities, which makes him entrusted to lead the troops. But Senku already has a plan to deal with them, even if it's only a temporary plan. He used the remaining gunpowder to frighten off the invaders, bluffing that the Science Kingdom had manufactured large quantities of firearms. Hearing that, Tsukasa's troops became frightened and decided to retreat for the time being. Senku is well aware that Tsukasa's troops will attack again if a storm arrives because the storm will render firearms unusable. Therefore, he used the remaining time to make new weapons, namely the katana. With the fighting power of Kohaku, Magma, Kinro, and the others, the people of the Science Kingdom managed to destroy the stone weapons of the invaders as the battle began. But that doesn't mean Hyoga just gave up. He ordered one of his girl named Homura to burn the bridge in the village while Senku was focused on fighting him, thus giving them a chance to launch a surprise attack. In this precarious state, Suika takes the initiative to lure Tsukasa's troops to the source of sulfuric acid. And as if realizing her plan, Senku and Kohaku immediately followed her with masks. In the end, the Kingdom of Science won the war after many of Tsukasa's troops died from inhaling the poisonous gas of sulfuric acid. Hyoga and Homura managed to save themselves by climbing a tall tree to escape the poisonous gas. The Tsukasa Empire did suffer a crushing defeat in the war against the Science Kingdom, but that didn't mean they were destroyed. They would attack again for revenge, and Senku knew that. That's why he planned to make calls, to anticipate if Tsukasa's troops attacked again someday. He wanted to make firearms, but unfortunately, he lacked materials because he needed nitric acid and shells to make gunpowder. Meanwhile, the Tsukasa Empire had taken over the nitric acid cavern. So inevitably, Senku had to change his strategy. Instead of making firearms, he decided to make telephones, which he felt were very important devices in warfare. Just by using that device, one could carry out the task of being a spy more easily. They can infiltrate enemy premises, investigate their weaknesses, and immediately report to Senku as soon as they find them. Of course, just making a phone is a long and complicated process. But for the sake of brevity, Senku had to build a water wheel, which was combined with a generator. That way, they could build a hydroelectric power plant, a component badly needed to make a phone work. But it didn't stop there because they had to make electrical storage containers, batteries, and light bulbs. Their purpose in making these items was to use them as a light source as they dug in the dark caverns, which contained the most heat-resistant metal, tungsten. It was only after they had obtained all the materials and equipment that Senku and the residents of the Kingdom of Science were finally able to build a cell phone. This is where the end of Dr. Stone's Season 1. Dr. Stone Season 2 begins with Senku and his friends succeeding in creating a cell phone after going through a long and tiring process. This cell phone will be the key in the war against the Tsukasa Empire. Later that night, Gen met Senku to discuss the devious plan he had in mind. He suggested that they instigate Tsukasa's men to divide them. To do that, they must first give the phone to Taiju and Yuzuriha, who are currently spies on Tsukasa's side. Then, over the phone, they would talk to Tsukasa's henchmen and try to invite them to defect to the Science Kingdom. Gen knew they couldn't simply persuade people on the enemy side to betray Tsukasa, so he decided to pretend to be Lillian Weinberg, who used to be a very famous singer. Everyone would know who she was, and it would be easier for Gen to persuade the people of the Tsukasa Empire if he disguised himself as her. In addition, Senku has a phonograph record containing Lillian's songs, which are very beautiful and touching. They could use it to convince the people of the Tsukasa Empire. Incidentally, Gen could imitate female voices quite well, although his voice didn't resemble Lillian's, but he was sure people wouldn't notice over the phone. By pretending to be Lillian, Gen plans to spread a hoax among the people of the Tsukasa Empire. He would tell them that the United States had recovered from the petrification and soon would send aid to other countries, including Japan. If his deception plan goes as expected, Tsukasa's men will rebel against him. The people of the Tsukasa Empire themselves are united by Tsukasa's charisma. They all thought they would be safe as long as they were under his protection, the strongest human, and in turn, they were willing to follow him and obey his orders. But all that would change if they thought the US troops would come to Japan, because no matter how strong Tsukasa was, he would be powerless in the face of modern US weaponry. The next day, Senku and the others started executing their plan. First, they must send a cell phone to Taiju, who entrusts 3 people for that mission. They were Chrome, who served as a technician, Magma, assigned to carry the bulky cell phone, and Gen, a guide. But their journey will not be easy since Tsukasa has placed the reconnaissance soldier, Homura, on the path they will use. It would be very dangerous if she discovered that the Science Kingdom had a telephone. Therefore Senku, Kohaku, Kinro, and Ginro would try to catch Homura before she realized what had happened. But for them to catch her easily, they need to distract her. To do so, Senku uses a sound bomb, which he makes by electrocuting water, causing it to evaporate into hydrogen and oxygen. Then, the gas from the mixture of the 2 compounds is put into balloons made of deer skin, and those balloons are his sound bombs. The bombs were weak but could make a loud banging sound, much like a tire popping. As soon as she heard the sounds of explosions, Homura rushed over to check the source of the sound, giving Chrome's party a chance to pass towards Tsukasa's place. But when Senku's group tried to capture her, they had a very hard time doing so. Turns out she is a former gymnast athlete. Her movements are very agile, fast, and flexible, allowing her to escape from the encirclement of Senku's group without any major difficulties. To make matters worse, she noticed 3 people moving towards Tsukasa's place. So, ignoring the people who were about to catch her, she immediately rushed after Chrome's group. Senku certainly can't let Homura move as she pleases, and so, he used his phone and called Chrome's group, telling them to turn around immediately. That way, their groups will surround her from both directions, closing the chance for her to escape. Ultimately, they captured Homura, proving that Senku's theory was correct. Communication in war is very important. With the successful capture of Homura, Chrome, Gen, and Magma resumed their journey until they finally stopped at a graveyard near Tsukasa's headquarters. It was none other than Senku's grave. Tsukasa believes that Senku is dead, and therefore, in his honor, he builds him a grave not far from his base. As far as Gen knows, Tsukasa allows Taiju and Yuzuriha to visit Senku's grave daily. For that reason, Gen chose that place to install the phone, and so, Chrome rushed to install the tools needed for the phone to work. Then, after everything was ready, the phone was buried in Senku's grave. But then, a problem occurred. One of Tsukasa's elite soldiers, Ukyo, hears the noises made by Gen and his friends during the telephone installation. Ukyo is a man with sharp hearing. In his previous life, he even worked as a sonar operator on a submarine, so it is unsurprising that he can hear voices from quite a distance. Feeling suspicious, Ukyo then checked Senku's grave and found the 3 intruders. Luckily, they had finished installing the telephone set and buried the phone before his arrival. Now they just have to think of a way to escape from his pursuit. To that end, Chrome explodes the battery, filling the area around them with smoke. After that, he ran to distract Ukyo while shouting as loud as he could. Magma understood Chrome's plan, so he ran and shouted with him, leaving Gen alone where they had been hiding before. And Gen knew what he had to do. While Chrome and Magma were busy screaming, he rushed off, heading back to the village. However, he cannot be caught by the enemy. He is the key for them to divide the people of the Tsukasa Empire. Meanwhile, Taiju and Yuzuriha notice the buried phone at the graveyard and dig it out. Even so, they had to be careful when talking to Senku, as one of Tsukasa's subordinates, Miki, was watching them closely. But instead, Senku thinks this is a golden opportunity for them to persuade Nikki to defect to them. And so, he asked Taiju to hand over the phone to her. At the same time, Gen arrived at the village and immediately took over the phone from Senku. By pretending to be Lillian, he starts talking to Nikki, telling her about the hoax about the United States. But to his surprise, Nikki turns out to be a huge fan of Lillian. In her previous life, she often watched Lillian's live concerts, collected her albums, and memorized the lyrics of her songs. And being a huge fan, she could immediately detect that the person talking to her was fake. Now that Gen's disguise has been exposed, Senku has no choice but to play Lillian's song, hoping it will convince Nikki that she is talking to her idol. And fortunately, his wish came true. She immediately burst into tears when she heard Lillian's singing voice. How could she not? She had never expected to hear Lillian's song in this stone age. So, with tears still in her eyes, she decided to join the Science Kingdom. Elsewhere, Chrome and Magma were still trying to escape from Ukyo. But it's not easy to do because Ukyo is very good at archery apart from having a sharp hearing. Strangely though, none of those shots hit Chrome or Magma. It made Chrome think, trying to understand what on earth Ukyo was thinking. He would have done it long ago if he wanted to kill them. After thinking for a while, he finally concluded that Ukyo didn't want to kill them. Therefore, he decided to surrender and let Ukyo catch him. As for Magma, Chrome told him to return to the village. Ukyo then takes Chrome to headquarters, where he is interrogated by Tsukasa himself. But he remains silent, saying absolutely nothing about the phone, even when he was threatened with death. In the end, Tsukasa decided to keep his stubborn captive in prison. Even so, Tsukasa was still curious about the purpose of Chrome coming near his base. So, he asked Ukyo where he found Chrome and if he was with anyone else. But unexpectedly, Ukyo chose to lie. He says that Chrome came alone and was in the nitric acid cave when he found him. Chrome's partner, Magma, had arrived at the village, where he was telling everyone about Chrome's capture. Hearing his story, Senku immediately thought of saving Chrome. Not only that, but he also wanted to attack the Tsukasa Empire with full force. But the physical strength of the villagers was still far behind those of the Tsukasa Empire. That was for sure. Therefore, Senku must find a way so they can defeat their enemy. And he finally found the answer in the form of an upgradable car, made of wood and powered by a steam engine. After the car was finished, they still had to test it. It turned out that the car could run as expected, apart from one problem that still plagued it. The problem is the car's wheels are made of wood, which, if used to drive on non-asphalt roads, will slow down the car's speed. So, to solve this problem, Senku designed alternative wheels made of woven bamboo. His decision paid off. Finally, they managed to make a car that works perfectly. Taking the car, which was used to carry science equipment, they set off for the Tsukasa Empire. There were no major problems during the trip, and without notice, they arrived near Tsukasa's headquarters, where they set up camp and made plans for their next move. And at this moment, Senku suddenly got a crazy idea. He wanted to strengthen their car and modify it into a tank. If they had such a powerful weapon, they could use it to break through the enemy base straight away. So, with that, they started gathering materials to build tanks. First, they collected a large amount of grass, then boiled it with sodium hydroxide. After that, the grass is pounded and dried until it becomes paper. But the process is not finished yet. Next, Senku made a kind of foundation out of wood, which was then covered with paper. Using the melted plastic as the adhesive, the papers continued to be piled on each other until they felt thick and strong. It had to be thick and strong because he wanted to make a carbon fiber shield. But one was not enough. They needed as many shields as possible. It was only after the number of shields was deemed sufficient that Senku put them on the car. He installed them so that he could turn the car into a tank, or rather, a carbon car. While Senku and the others were experimenting, Chrome was trying to escape from prison. But sadly, no matter what he did, he couldn't get out of that place. But when night fell, while he was about to sleep, a mysterious person approached the bamboo bars and threw a battery at him. As soon as he saw it, Chrome knew it was the key to his escape. And so, like a madman, he began to move in the prison for a whole day to collect sweat. Then, after he had accumulated enough, he electrocuted the sweat water with the battery before splashing it on the ropes that bound the bamboo bars. As a result, the ropes peel off, and the bamboo bars can be torn down easily. But his escape attempt is still not over. Tsukasa's elite warrior, Youe, saw him run away and immediately chased after him. And the worst part is, Chrome reached the edge of the cliff, forcing him to face his pursuer even though he knew he wouldn't be able to beat Youe in a fair fight. And so, he chose to use a strategy, pretending to be sick. To look more convincing, Chrome ate a plant that produced a red liquid, making it look like he had just vomited blood. Then he sprayed it at Youe, right in the face, causing him to panic for fear of catching the disease. And this is the opportunity he has been waiting for. Using a bamboo stick, he hit Youe's groin area as hard as possible, instantly knocking him out. Right now, Chrome didn't know that Senku and the others were camping not far from him. But luckily, Kohaku spotted him while she was monitoring the surroundings with a telescope. Finally, after being imprisoned and having to feign illness, he is reunited with his beloved friends. With everyone gathered, Senku and Gen continued their plan to attract the people of the Tsukasa Empire to their side. Their plan went well. They managed to trick some of Tsukasa's men into believing the US troops were coming soon. But not long after, Ukyo found them. He even saw how they used the phone to turn the people of the Tsukasa Empire into treason. At this moment, Gen tries to trick him by pretending to be Lillian, but his attempts fail miserably. Ukyo instantly recognized his fake voice. But to their surprise, Ukyo had no intention of reporting this betrayal to Tsukasa. He was fed up with Tsukasa, who arbitrarily destroyed petrified people. So instead of reporting to Tsukasa, he decided to join the Science Kingdom. Moreover, he has the same vision as Senku. He also wants to save all humans, without exception. Senku accepted Ukyo into the kingdom of science without having to think twice. There's no reason to refuse him, especially after knowing Ukyo was the one who saved Chrome while he was in prison. With this, the kingdom of science now has a lot of personnel, enough to attack the Tsukasa Empire. They just need to refine their weapons before moving on to attack. And so, they added some modifications to the carbon car and attached a cannon to it, making it look more like a real tank. But still, they wouldn't kill anyone from the enemy's side. They will only use the tank to lower the enemy's morale. A few days later, Tsukasa and Hyuga visit Senku's grave, where Tsukasa notices a dig. Finally, he found out that there was a phone hidden in that place all this time. What's more, the phone had Senku's name on it. At that moment, Tsukasa rushed toward the nitric acid cave. He could already predict that Senku and the people in his kingdom would target that place. While he was moving towards the cave, Senku's group had already arrived in front of the cave. And as they thought, their tank was able to intimidate Tsukasa's men guarding the cave. As a result, Kohaku, Kinro, Ginro, Magma, and others could easily subdue them. However, just as they thought they had managed to take control of the cave, Tsukasa and Hyuga arrived at the scene, causing the clashes to continue. But while the fighters from the Kingdom of Science are trying to confront Tsukasa and Hyuga, Senku and Chrome enter the cave to make explosives with nitric acid there because only with explosives can they defeat Tsukasa. Senku mixes nitric acid with sulfuric acid to make it before he adds glycerin obtained from soap to it to produce nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin is a liquid that explodes on impact. He then drips the liquid onto the end of the paper airplane, making it a paper airplane bomb that explodes as it hits a tree. Seeing that incredible explosion, Tsukasa and Hyuga realized they had lost. They surrendered to the Kingdom of Science. But what Senku said next came as a complete shock to Tsukasa. He offers a truce with the Tsukasa Empire, arguing that he knows the reason behind Tsukasa's actions, namely his sister. Indeed, Tsukasa has a sister named Mirai, but in her previous life, she was seriously ill and was even in a coma. The doctors had given up, saying that her life would not be long. But, just like everyone else, she was petrified when that mysterious green light appeared, and she is still petrified to this day. But Senku sees it as an opportunity for him to make a truce with Tsukasa. He planned to revive Mirai with revival fluid. And not only that, her disease can most likely be cured if she revives from it. The principle is the same as when Senku first rose from the dead after Tsukasa broke his neck. So, this is something that Senku offers to make peace with Tsukasa. It was up to Tsukasa whether he would accept his offer or not. But of course, Tsukasa accepts it. He couldn't possibly miss the chance to see Mirai recover from her illness. And so, they all rush to the location where Mirai was. It turns out that she is buried under a cliff, but that doesn't really matter to Senku. He had modified nitroglycerin into dynamite, with which he could dig into the soil where Mirai was buried. After Mirai was found, Senku quickly poured revival fluid on her. Luckily, his prediction ended up right. The stones around her body were eroded away as her disease disappeared. She could open her eyes and stood up, causing Tsukasa to shed tears of joy as he hugged her tightly. Senku and the others were preparing to return to Ishigami village the next day. But oddly enough, when Chrome checked the dynamite box, he found less dynamite than it should have been. A moment later, an explosion was seen from the direction of the nitric acid cave. It turned out that Homura was the one who stole the dynamite to blow up the cave. But she doesn't work alone. It was Hyuga who told her to do that. Meanwhile, Hyuga himself is now with Tsukasa and Mirai near a waterfall, waiting for the moment when Mirai is off guard. And when that moment came, he immediately attacked her, knowing full well that if he did that, Tsukasa would protect her. Sure enough, as soon as he saw Hyuga pointing his spear at Mirai, he immediately jumped up to shield her from the spear. As a result, he was the one who ended up getting hit by Hyuga's spear. It turns out that the real antagonist is not Tsukasa but Hyuga. He had wanted to kill Tsukasa for a long time, but he knew his strength was not enough. But then, Senku revived Mirai, and at that moment, Hyuga finally found an opportunity to kill Tsukasa. He knew Tsukasa would protect Mirai if he attacked her, and his guess was absolutely correct. The attack completely weakened Tsukasa. He couldn't do anything while Hyuga knocked him off the cliff. Senku, who saw all that happened, tried to save Tsukasa by grabbing his hand, but Hyuga hit him from behind, causing him and Tsukasa to fall into the river and be swept away by the current. Unexpectedly, Hyuga jumped to follow them. When they made it to the bank of the river, Hyuga told Senku that he had the same ideals as Tsukasa before he changed. For him, petrification is a natural selection to reduce the human population. But after all, Hyuga couldn't possibly build his empire alone. He needs Senku's help, so he wants to invite Senku to join him in creating his utopia. The answer was obvious. Senku didn't want to accept his invitation. He'd rather run away than have to stay longer with that lunatic. But just as he was about to leave, Tsukasa signaled that he still had the energy to fight Hyuga. Feeling that they still have hope, Senku then tries to distract Hyuga by throwing stones at him. When Hyuga was distracted, Tsukasa got up and beat him. But still, right now, he was seriously injured, making it difficult for him to fight against Hyuga. After a long fight, Hyuga managed to corner Tsukasa. But while he was completely focused on Tsukasa, Senku took advantage of the situation to sneakily crawl over to him and then electrocuted him with electricity from the battery installed in Senku's body. The electric voltage is quite large, equivalent to that produced by a stun gun. But thanks to that, Hyuga was finally defeated. Due to his serious injury, Tsukasa was immediately treated. However, his chances of surviving were very slim since his internal organs had been destroyed. Of course, Senku realized this, but he didn't give up. He thought of an idea to petrify Tsukasa. So, if he was petrified and Senku revived him with revival fluid, Tsukasa's wounds would heal. The only problem is that Senku still doesn't know how to petrify living things. The green light that once petrified all humans was still a mystery to him. He couldn't create that light no matter how hard he thought. So, after some thought, Senku realized he had no other choice. He must accept Tsukasa's death. Therefore, he makes a refrigerator, or freezer, to freeze Tsukasa's corpse so it doesn't rot. He will remain in that freezer while Senku tries to find a way to petrify living things. Senku must find out the secret of the green light, where it comes from, and who created it. And he couldn't possibly get any information if he just stayed where he was. That's why he and the people of the Science Kingdom decided that they would explore the world. They would build ships to sail and search for information about the light, no matter if it would be a long time before they succeeded. With this, Dr. Stone's Season 2 ended.